Hello and welcome to our webinar, where today we'll be discussing Panduit Corporation and how they migrated 260 Hyperion planning on-premise users to the cloud technology called PBCS, and how they also took advantage of another cloud solution called Enterprise Performance Reporting Cloud Service to help with their board reporting. Before we get started, I thought I'd give a little bit of background on myself. Again, I'm Scott Costello. Certified public accountant, as well as certified in the Hyperion suite of technologies, including planning, S.M.A.R.T, Hyperion financial management. You may have seen me speak before at places like Open World, Kscope, Collaborate, or a different regional event. I've been in this space for almost 20 years now, helping organizations find the right solutions for their planning, forecasting, close, and reporting needs. A little bit about the agenda today. So again, we're going to be talking about Panduit and some of the challenges that they had with their planning solution. We're going to talk about how we were able to migrate them and the benefits that they achieved through that migration. Also want to discuss one of the solutions called Enterprise Performance Reporting Cloud Service, give you a quick background of what that solution looks like, and then how Panduit's using it today. We'll also go through some lessons learned for any organization who's considering a migration from on-premises to the cloud. And next step, what's in the future for Panduit? So for those of you unfamiliar with Panduit, founded in 1955, they have over 900 different patents. They are privately owned, completely independent, and they have about 5,000 employees globally, serving customers in 112 different countries. Their headquarters located in Tinley Park is LEED Gold Certified headquarters, and they have factories and sales representation on each continent. Panduit really provides solutions and provides some of the hardware and technologies for large organizations like Cisco, IBM, Rockwell, to help with the complete infrastructure needs of their clients. So, a little bit about the planning solution and what we did here. Again, Oracle PBCS stands for Planning, Budgeting, Cloud Service, and it's the Hyperion planning solution in the cloud. So there was really two steps to this implementation. One was simplifying their current application and then moving it into the cloud environment. So they had a lot of challenges with their current state. Their on-premises Hyperion planning application was a bit outdated, difficult to maintain. There was always a fear that it would crash and not be able to get restored. They did have some backups, but not easily able to back things up. So they really needed a solution to simplify the planning progress and continue to integrate with their general ledger, which was Oracle EBS. They also wanted to modify, as part of the simplification, some of the P&L focus, so that focused really on some of the business units and where responsibility lied, which meant modifying some of the allocations, updating the dimensionality, rebuilding some of the integration. So instead of going through EBS in their on-premises world, we're actually using an Amazon instance to connect the technologies together and automate the whole process. They also wanted better reporting for some of their end users and the ability to do dashboarding. So in order to simplify the entire process and avoid some of the infrastructure challenges that they were having today, they selected the Planning and Budgeting Cloud Service, or Oracle's PBCS. A couple things in their current state. Their management statements generated well over 154,000 statements on a monthly basis. And as you can imagine, that had a lot of strain on the system. There was always questions too from the business about allocation accuracy when you get down to that level of granularity. Some of it felt like it was non-value add, and there was a recognition that they really needed to have the business focus on the higher levels and then drill in from there. So continuing with the current state, it really got down to the lowest level of values. So across the dimensionality, country dimension, or 244, including some of the child values. They said 93 countries that they operate on, and then they go down another layer. 19 of the countries, though, 19 of 93 have 90% of all revenue share. So there was a recognition that maybe the focus should be just on, where the value add was on that 90%. The product dimension had almost 600 members to it, 3 different P&Ls. But there was also a recognition that over the years, only a portion of those had revenue. So 96 of the 331 had that revenue share. Let's focus on those. 21 of the 46 product categories, 90% is where most of the revenue was focused, so let's have those. In terms of their business dimension, they actually increased this. They went from 5 to 6 in terms of the analytics. So when you do the math for all these and you multiply things out, that's where the possible P&L combinations of country, product, business could get quite large. 710,000 different combinations. 154 with that possible revenue combination. So in simplifying, again, looking at these 3 different dimensions, the new proposed structure was to bring things up. Let's not get down to the 3-digit product line. Let's not get down to the country. Let's bring everything up to a product category. Let's bring it up to more regional focus so that we can reduce the volume of the statements, reduce the load put on the system, but more importantly, have the business focus on what moves the needle the most. Have the business focus on where are the areas that are most critical for Panduit continues thriving. So how do we go about this simplification process? We actually did some unique things here. So obviously extracted all the full new data set, so what the historical data was. We even combined some of the dimensions that they had today to reduce that overall dimensionality and streamline it. So what was once 3 dimensions, we were able to combine into 1. It took some time to obviously update the outline, reload, revalidate data. Thankfully, the cloud solution comes with some technology called data management, or FDM, and we are able to use that as part of the mapping and translation of the historical data into this new world environment. Now, this did take quite some time because there was a lot of validation going on. There was a significant volume of data that we were trying to consolidate. One of the largest applications I've ever worked with in terms of PBCS. So we had to break up some of the information to make that work accurately by breaking in the data files historically into chunks so that we could load it into the cloud. We also had to modify calculations, obviously, when you have a change in dimensionality like that, so that it could be streamlined. We were able to reduce some things there and make it one script. We also were able to simplify some of the currency conversion process too. That was done a little bit more offline that we're now able to put into the system. So again, with those 2 processes of simplifying their application and then moving into the cloud, we achieved a couple benefits, more than a couple. Processing time was huge. So you can imagine with an application this size and using an infrastructure that was a bit challenging, the processing times significantly were reduced. So the annual budget process used to actually take 3+ days. So now we're able to complete the whole process in 16 hours, including the end user's input. There's no offline processes of summarizing things in Excel or doing any manual things to make it all work. You can automatically generate all the statements that they need directly from PBCS. Some of the calculations that were going on, we talked about allocations a little bit for their expenses. They used to take 22 hours before in their old environment, now it took 90 minutes. We also expanded reports at the department level while consolidating things in general, and things that would take possibly 20 minutes to run actually reduced to 30 seconds. Now again, this was a combination of both the reduction in application size, but also the power and the speed of the cloud, the likes of which they did not have in their infrastructure prior to this. So with that, there was less reliance on T just because it's all cloud-based. And they do use our managed services called S.M.A.R.T, which I'll mention here in a second. And thankfully, one of the directors there who had concerns about things crashing on a nightly basis, we've now created a rolling backup process in place for the entire application. Put it on the stable data centers of Oracle, and with that rolling backup, give them kind of peace of mind that their application is always available if ever needed. So great success on just the planning side, moving to the cloud and simplifying the process. Again, if you are considering a migration from Hyperion Planning to the cloud, we do recommend just using this opportunity to reconsider your design, see if there are efficiencies that can be achieved, both through just the software, which has come a long way over the years and has new features, new capabilities that you should consider, but also with the cloud itself and just the power of the data centers that Oracle provides. All right, next I wanted to talk a little bit about EPRCS. And EPRCS is another solution that Panduit acquired and implemented. And again, it stands for Enterprise Performance Reporting Cloud Service. So let me give a little bit of background on what this tool is. And I like to start with this quote from Brent Dykes, writing for Forbes. So one of the key things in this article that he wrote, talking about essential data science skills for everyone's needs, was how important data was. We all know your data holds a tremendous amount of value, but not an ounce of value can be created unless you have insights that are uncovered and translated into actions or business outcomes. Right? So to summarize, numbers are great. We all need numbers, but what about the context behind those numbers? What about the commentary behind those numbers? That's what's critical to actually translate things into actions or outcomes. And that's exactly what this solution provides. So when we talk about a narrative reporting process, it's everything from identifying what's the subject, visualizing the data, analyzing anomalies or the unexpected results, the what, right? What happened here? Then being able to investigate causes and impacts so you can answer the questions of who did this, when did this happen, why did this happen, where did it happen? Be able to identify solutions or mitigations and get everyone's input into it. Create a clear and concise narrative to accompany that data visualization. Ask for peers to review it, get involvement from the rest of the community. And then be able to publish easily all those insights to the stakeholders. So some common types of how we see enterprise reporting cloud service being used, in terms of like the private sector, we see it everything from budget books, quarterly business reviews, and that's how Panduit is using it, operation reviews, project proposals. Really think about any document that you might produce internally that has a lot of commentary to it. Things you might produce in Word or PowerPoint. Things where you need an explanation. From an external reporting side, obviously there's a lot of options there in terms of 10Q, 10K, SEC filing, tax reports, annual reports. There's a lot of industry-specific reports where there's a need for commentary around the values, corporate and social responsibility reports. From a public sector, there's a lot of different things to consider too. CAFR report, budget books as well, any sort of congressional budget justifications, issue papers, long-term sustainability, you name it. And this is just scratching the surface, just to give you some examples of how other organizations are using them. So let's talk about the solution a little bit more. Again, Enterprise Performance Reporting Cloud Service is that complete and integrated platform. And what we mean by that is it's using the same Hyperion technology that we all know. It uses things like Smart View, S-based components to it. It has the same user interface as the rest of the EPM cloud suite. So what it does have embedded in it too is this full reporting lifecycle where I can have not just the reporting and analysis, but I can define who authors the document, how we collaborate, and how we comment on it. It's all part of that same integrated reporting framework, all part of the same integrated EPM suite. And we can seamlessly leverage existing documents, existing data that you may have in Hyperion or in other sources. So this is integrated directly with things like Essbase. When we talk about the process for narrative reporting, the way the technology breaks it down is into 3 segments here. One, the author, who's the person that will compile the various reports, add supporting details, put the package together. Having reviewers, the ones that gather commentary, maybe create multiple drafts, revise commentary and content accordingly. And then you have sign-off, right? Those who may have electric signatures or do the final report, do any sort of modifications that need be. So let's talk about how's Panduit using this today. So for them, because they already had PBCS in place, and they have a couple different applications of PBCS, one for sales. We took directly the data from PBCS, and you don't have to move the data, you don't have to transfer it or anything like that. This literally sits on top of it, and use solutions like the S.M.A.R.T View add-in to help produce the complete package. So with that direct connection, there's components in EPRCS called doclets. As you can imagine, those are documents broken up into little pieces, hence the name doclets. And with those little pieces is where you can assign responsibility and accountability. So for their doclets, they would have authors, people who would start to bring the data into the system, and they did this all through PowerPoint. And I'll show you their PowerPoint here in just a little bit. So they produce the data in PowerPoint just through a S.M.A.R.T View refresh, and then allow the users to go in and author some of those components, add commentary to it, and then submit it to the ultimate signer. So whoever was going to have final sign-off, in this case it was one of the directors, and be able to just assure that everything looked the way it was before they published it and presented it to the board. Now obviously some of the key things that they were concerned about that was provided with this was just the security of information and being able to make sure that they could collaborate effectively. So the user authentication is all managed through the cloud, just like the rest of the technology. Similar to shared services, you can assign different roles or responsibilities, and you can assign accountability for different parts of the document or doclets. So some of those roles, again, service administrator, who can do everything, the application administrator, who kind of creates all the different pieces. Where they had most of their users was on the report administrator that could create some of the packages, create some of the definition. And then obviously users that could create folders, users that could view some of the artifacts as well. For Panduit, they actually started with their quarterly business reviews for producing some documentation, producing their collaborative reporting, but have intentions of extending that quite a bit further into their monthly close package, the board of directors package. They have an executive S&OP meeting where they break down things even further. So having this technology for all these pieces really is going to make things a truly collaborative effort. So how they were challenged before this is everything was done kind of offline. Everything was copy and paste. So there was a recognition that they need to streamline this process a little bit more. And they wanted one place for generation of all these decks. They knew that PBCS had all the data that they need, but they didn't want to have to copy and paste it over. So a big reason they chose EPRCS was because of the integration that they already had with the planning cloud service and seeing the ability to collaborate, produce unified document, continue to use tools that they're already using like PowerPoint and PDF. So to give you a little insight into their solution, these are the different components of their QBR document. So again, they have an author of the different phases here. They have a review phase and then a sign-off phase. So the authoring phase is where they start to collect the data, is where they start to make some of their initial comments. The review phase is where people can add additional commentary for their lines of business. And then obviously the sign-off phase where it can be finalized. The nice thing too is in some of these phases, you could have multiple reviews. You can have multiple reviewers. So if you want more collaboration, if you want more people involved in commenting and improving the data, you can have all that directly in the system. And with just click of a button, someone can sign off or reject it. And they can do that through the web interface of EPRCS, or they can do that directly through some of the Word and PowerPoint tools of S.M.A.R.T View. So to give you a little insight into their QBR for April 2018, these are the things that they were focusing on: providing business revenue for globally broken down by the different businesses, showing the Panduit P&L. We won't go into the data here, obviously. Their table of contents also, or their deck, included things around the network infrastructure and the business units for those data centers, both revenue and P&L. And then electrical and industrial infrastructure business unit broken down for the revenue and P&L too. So again, several different business units and different owners of those business units where they wanted to add commentary. So again, most of this was done directly in PowerPoint. You can see this is a PowerPoint document behind the scenes with the S.M.A.R.T View add-in. And with that S.M.A.R.T View add-in, you can do things directly in here, like upload the document to the database, submit things, approve things, reject things. The data that you see, that grid behind it, is coming directly from PBCS. The commentary below that data is what's uploaded into the system. So that's the narrative component of it. But even though this just looks like a PowerPoint document, all that commentary, all that data is stored directly in the application. The access, again, through PowerPoint, this is an access where you could actually view things directly in Excel too. That's an option, as well as Word. So you can take advantage of the entire suite and do things in Microsoft Office if you want. Again, it's also web-based, so if you prefer users to use the web-based solution, you can go directly into the web and see everything too. One thing that they wanted to highlight in the web-based piece of it is the auditing. So one of the big challenges in any sort of narrative reporting process is who owns the document, where is it loaded, what version are we on. With this auditing, you can see and it tracks by the user, by the date and time, what's checked in, what's checked out, what's approved, what's canceled. All that documentation, all the auditing of the application and where it resides is built into this technology. Along with this, you do have the option of having multiple reviews. So this was important to them so that they could have more than one person kind of look at things, sign off on things, and make sure that in terms of that collaboration, they were getting as much input as possible. Some of the benefits then achieved by this, as you can imagine, this was, again, an all offline process with a lot of copying and pasting and emailing of a deck around. Some of the businesses achieved were, businesses were able to start playing with this data, kind of analyze it the way they wanted to, and make sure that all that commentary, all that context was in one place. They didn't have to wait any longer for people to retrieve the data from the deck and then send it to them. The tables were populated automatically, again, directly from PBCS. Now there's consistency too, because that's what sometimes this technology helps implement in how the reports are produced. Having sort of that consistent design, having some technology kind of drive that behavior. So whether it was for their total company, to the business, to the theaters, to the product levels, having that consistency just obviously makes things easier to consume. And then having a formal process for review and approval of the commentary directly in the application, as opposed to always having to meet to kind of go through everything. They could do it all directly online. So great success with Panduit in both their migration in the cloud and with enterprise reporting cloud service and the narrative reporting. But I always like to take just a minute and discuss the lessons learned from this. Some things to consider. Again, we were able to simplify their dimensionality, simplify the hierarchies. That provided tremendous processing efficiencies. Anytime you can clean up your application, and as you migrate to the cloud, it's a perfect time to start thinking about how to clean things up. You're going to see efficiencies just in the cleanup. Added to that is the horsepower that the cloud provides. And that's where we're seeing significant improvements in calc speeds, reporting speeds, those sorts of things. However, Panduit had a fair amount of history, and just making sure you budget enough time to bring in all that history if you're making significant changes to the applications so that you have enough time to validate it, everybody's happy with it. If you're doing more of a lift and shift, this is less critical, or you don't have as much history or as large of a database. You still have to make sure that all the data comes over, obviously, but if it's a significant amount of data, just accounting for enough time to do that. S-based security filters, they did have in place too. So if you have any S-based security filters outside of what planning creates by definition, we have to create a little bit of a workaround on that, and that's what we did for Panduit. But the validation data, as I mentioned, is crucial. When we concluded our implementation work at Panduit, we did have them migrate to KPI's S.M.A.R.T practice. And just a little plug on our S.M.A.R.T team. It stands for System Maintenance and Remote Troubleshooting. It's a group of consultants where you get a named individual to help as an extension of your administrator. So whether you need to complement or supplement some of the administration of the solution, because of how they're expanding this technology, they need a little help on the finance, for the finance team. Our S.M.A.R.T team also does some of the regression testing. So as Oracle puts out monthly updates, if there's any changes to the applications, we have a quick run through just to ensure that everything works as expected. They also help things with optimization of the application continues to grow, and do traditional administrative maintenance like dimensions, modifying business rules, updating users, and helping train and support those end users. So for Panduit, the next steps, now that they have the application up and running, they do have some future plans to consider. Want to consider things like a 3-year strategic plan, getting down to the business and theater, just to improve the annual plan capabilities. Really take advantage of some of the dashboarding capabilities. If you haven't seen this with PBCS or EPRCS, they continue to add new dashboarding capabilities, they call infolets now, that really bring the data alive. Also eventually get to balance sheet and cash flow reporting, being able to do P&L, even further levels of granularity, and continue to deploy EPRCS. So using that throughout the organization for consistent narrative reporting process. So a great client, a great success. So a great collaborative effort between both teams at KPI and Panduit to make this successful. That's the end of my presentation today, my webinar. Thank you again for joining. This is my contact information. Also Greg Olma, who leads some of our development work. There's Greg's direct line and email. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to either one of us, and be sure to follow our blog where we're constantly updating with new tips and tricks on both cloud and on-premises solution. Thank you again.